Emma Parker had always believed that peace came from control. After her divorce, she built her life around calm routines that left no room for surprises. Her mornings began with the same walk through her quiet Portland neighborhood, coffee in hand, earphones playing soft jazz. Her evenings were quiet, a book, a candle, and the sound of rain outside her apartment window. She liked that nothing unexpected happened anymore. It made her feel safe. Her marriage had ended 3 years ago, not in a storm of anger, but in silence, the kind that grows when love fades. Her ex-husband, Mark, had moved across the country, remarried, and seemed happy. Emma told everyone she was happy too, and for the most part, it was true. She liked her independence, her small marketing job, her 2 close friends who made sure she laughed sometimes. She had learned to be enough for herself. But sometimes, when she caught couples laughing in cafes or saw people holding hands in the rain, a quiet ache stirred in her chest. It wasn't about Mark. That chapter was closed. It was about connection. That unexplainable spark that makes you feel alive again. Still, she pushed that thought away. She had made herself a promise the night she signed her divorce papers. No more risks, no more heartbreak. So when her friend Lily invited her to a company networking event one Friday evening, Emma hesitated. "You know, those things aren't for me," she said. But Lily laughed and said, "You've been single for too long, Em. Go out, meet people, even if it's just for a drink and some bad appetizers." Emma almost said no. She didn't want to stand around pretending to enjoy small talk. But a small voice inside whispered, maybe one night out won't hurt. So she went. The event was held in a downtown hotel lounge, warm lighting, light music, and too many people trying to sound more important than they were. Emma stood near the corner, holding a glass of sparkling water, counting the minutes before she could politely leave. That's when she heard someone say, "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." She turned and met a pair of calm, dark eyes. The man standing before her had an easy presence, confident, but not in a loud way. He smiled, a little amused, like he'd caught her secret. "Am I that obvious?" she asked, trying not to laugh. "A little," he said. "But you're not alone. I'm Daniel." He offered his hand, and she shook it. He wasn't dressed like the others, no fancy suit, no flashy tie. Just a simple jacket, rolled sleeves, a camera hanging around his neck. "You're not with the company?" she asked. "No," he said. "I was hired to photograph the event. But honestly, I'm just here for the stories. People are fascinating when they pretend to be confident." She smiled. "And what story do you think I'm pretending to tell?" He tilted his head thoughtfully. "You don't look like you're pretending. You look like someone who's good at being alone, but maybe tired of it." His words caught her off guard. She wanted to say something clever, but instead, she just stared at him, unsure why a stranger's observation felt so personal. They ended up talking for hours about her work, travels, books they both loved, and how both of them found comfort in rainy days. Daniel told her he was a freelance photographer, mostly doing travel and lifestyle projects. He had lived in Seattle for years, but was in Portland for a short assignment. "I've been everywhere," he said, "but I'm still trying to figure out where I belong." Something about the way he said it, open, honest, slightly sad, made her chest tighten. It had been a long time since someone spoke to her without pretending to have everything figured out. When the event ended, most people left in pairs or groups. Emma and Daniel were still talking, sitting near the window, watching the rain outside. She didn't want the night to end, but she didn't know why. "I should go," she said finally. "Can I walk you out?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The air smelled fresh, clean. They walked slowly toward her car, the street quiet around them. "I'm glad I came tonight," she said softly. "Me too," he replied. "Maybe you'll let me buy you a coffee before I leave town." Emma smiled, unsure whether she should say yes. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe is good," he answered with that same calm smile. "I can work with maybe." She laughed, then got into her car. As she drove home, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. It wasn't love. She knew better than that, but it was something. That night, as she sat by her window, she tried to focus on her book, but couldn't. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel, his voice, the way he listened, how he seemed genuinely curious about her life. It felt strange. She barely knew him, but it felt like he had seen through her walls without trying. She reminded herself of her rules. No emotional risks, no attachment. No getting close to anyone who might complicate her peace. She repeated those words like a prayer before bed. But when she closed her eyes, she saw his smile again, and that calm voice saying, "You look like someone who's good at being alone, but tired of it." The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. The world outside was quiet, wrapped in soft fog. She made coffee and sat at her table, still thinking about him. She didn't like how easily her thoughts had wandered, how quickly her calm life had shifted. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She had built her days around predictability, and now a single evening had unsettled all of it. Later that week, an email popped up from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "Coffee for the maybe." It was from Daniel. Her heart skipped a beat before she even opened it. The message was simple: a coffee shop name, a day, a time, and a smiley face. No pressure, no expectation. She stared at the email for a long time. Lily, seeing the look on her face at work, leaned over and said, "What's that smile about?" "It's nothing," Emma said quickly. "Nothing doesn't make you blush," Lily teased. Emma rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her grin. "It's just someone I met at the event. He's different, different good, or different dangerous. I'm not sure yet," Emma admitted. That evening, she drafted 3 different replies and deleted them all. She didn't know why she was nervous. It was just coffee. Still, she felt as though replying would mean breaking some invisible line she had drawn years ago. A line that said she was done with this kind of thing. But curiosity is a quiet force. It whispers when logic is loud. And Emma's curiosity was louder than her rules that night. So she finally typed back, "Maybe coffee sounds nice." The moment she hit send, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. It wasn't about Daniel, not really. It was about herself, the part she thought was gone, the part that still wanted to feel something real. That night she stood by the window again, rain falling softly outside, the city lights flickering like small promises. She didn't know where this was going, and that uncertainty should have scared her. But it didn't. For the first time in years, Emma Parker didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt alive. She didn't realize it yet, but that single choice replying to his email would change everything. It would test every rule she'd ever made, and every wall she thought would keep her heart safe. And somewhere deep down, she already knew it. Because sometimes life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just begins again when you least expect it. The cafe Daniel chose was small and quiet, hidden between 2 old bookstores in downtown Portland. Emma almost canceled 3 times that morning. She told herself she was too busy, that she didn't need this kind of distraction. But curiosity won. By the time she walked through the cafe door, Daniel was already there, camera on the table, coffee in hand, smiling like he'd been waiting for her all day. "You came," he said softly. "Standing up, barely," she admitted, laughing. "I almost changed my mind. Then I'm glad you didn't." From the moment she sat down, it was easy, too easy. They talked about work, travel, favorite cities, little memories that didn't seem to matter but somehow did. Daniel had a way of making everything feel personal. He didn't talk to fill silence. He talked to connect. When she mentioned how she liked the sound of rain, he said, "That's funny. I chase sunlight for photos, but I like rain when I'm home. It slows life down." 2 hours passed before she realized it. When they finally stood to leave, he said, "I don't know when I'll get another day like this. Can we do it again?" Emma hesitated. She could already feel the pull, the quiet danger beneath their easy laughter. But she nodded anyway. "Sure, just as friends," she added quickly. He smiled, not mocking, just knowing. Of course. Their coffee as friends became a pattern. Once a week at first, then twice. They found new cafes, walked along the riverfront, explored weekend art shows. They texted about random things, music, recipes, books, and sometimes nothing at all. Each message felt like a thread pulling them closer. Daniel told her about his travels, how photography wasn't just his job. It was how he tried to understand people. Everyone's story looks different when you look close enough, he said one day as he showed her pictures from Iceland. Sometimes you think you're capturing a place, but you're actually capturing how it made you feel. Emma liked listening to him. He spoke with quiet passion, and that stirred something inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. She found herself checking her phone too often, waiting for his messages. She told herself it was harmless. But deep down she knew this wasn't friendship anymore. One rainy evening, Daniel called her and said, "Come out. The city looks too beautiful to waste indoors." Against her better judgment, she went. They walked by the river, the lights reflecting on wet pavement. The smell of rain and coffee filled the air. "You always seem calm," he said suddenly. "Even when you talk about sad things. How do you do that?" Emma smiled faintly. "You learn to stay calm when you've already been through storms." He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "I think you hide behind calm. You use it like a wall." She wanted to protest, but he was right. She had spent years keeping her emotions locked away, believing that was strength. Now, standing beside him, she wasn't sure what strength meant anymore. After that night, things changed. Their meetings grew longer. They shared deeper conversations about love, loneliness, regrets. Daniel confessed that his relationship with someone back home was complicated. "We've been on and off for years," he said quietly. "Sometimes it feels like home, sometimes it feels like a cage." Emma froze. She hadn't known. He wasn't married, but he wasn't entirely free either. "I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want this to feel wrong," Key said. She wanted to walk away right then to protect herself. But when she looked at him, the honesty in his eyes, the sadness behind his smile, she couldn't. She told herself she understood. She told herself it was just friendship still. But every time they met, her heart betrayed her. They started seeing each other more after work. Before his trips, during short breaks between projects, he'd bring her small things, a photo, a flower, a note scribbled on a napkin. "For when I'm gone," he'd say. Each gift was simple but meaningful. Emma tried to keep distance, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. At night, she'd catch herself smiling at nothing, replaying their conversations. Then guilt would hit her like a wave. She didn't want to be the reason someone else's relationship failed. But what they had didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like something that had found her when she wasn't looking. One weekend, Daniel invited her to a photography exhibition where his work was featured. The gallery was filled with soft lights and quiet music. Emma walked through the room, looking at the photos, cities' faces, moments frozen in time. One picture caught her attention. A woman standing by a rainy window, looking out. "That one's my favorite," Daniel said behind her. "It's not about sadness. It's about longing for something you don't understand yet." She turned to him, and their eyes met. For a second, the room faded. It was just them, the air thick with unspoken feelings. They didn't touch, didn't say anything. But in that silence, everything between them became clear. She was falling for him, and it wasn't something she could stop. After the exhibition, they walked outside into the cool night air. Daniel looked at her and said, "You know, this isn't simple." "I know," she whispered. "Then why do we keep doing this?" She didn't have an answer. Maybe because it felt too right to stop. Maybe because, for once, she felt seen, alive, real. That night she sat by her window again, staring at the city lights. She couldn't deny it anymore. She cared about him. But every part of her knew it couldn't last. He would leave soon. His life was somewhere else. And yet the thought of not seeing him again hurt more than she expected. The next few weeks blurred by. Daniel's project was ending, and his departure date grew closer. Emma tried to act normal, but everything felt heavier. One afternoon, he stopped by her office. "I just wanted to see you before I go," he said. She followed him outside. The city felt different that day, quieter, as if holding its breath. "Where will you go next?" she asked. "Maybe back home," he said, not sounding convinced. "Maybe somewhere new. I don't know anymore." They stood there, neither knowing what to say. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small printed photo. It was the cafe where they had met for the first time, sunlight spilling through the window. "I took this the day you walked in," he said. "You were smiling at something the barista said. I wanted to remember that moment." Emma stared at the photo, speechless. "Why would you want to remember me?" "Because you reminded me that not everything real has to last forever to matter." Her throat tightened. "That sounds like goodbye." "It might be," he said softly. "But I hope it's not the end." She couldn't speak. The part of her that lived by rules wanted to tell him to go, to leave before they both got hurt. But her heart, fragile, stubborn, wanted him to stay, even if it meant pain later. That evening she didn't go home right away. She walked by the river where they'd walked before. The city lights danced on the water. And she thought about everything, her promises, her fears, and how one person had changed the rhythm of her quiet life. For years she had believed that peace meant safety. Now she was learning that sometimes peace comes after chaos, when you finally let yourself feel again. When she got home, she placed the photo Daniel gave her on her bookshelf. She didn't cry, but she couldn't sleep either. She knew what was happening between them couldn't last. But she also knew she would never forget it, because some people don't stay forever. They arrive to remind you that you're still capable of warmth, still capable of feeling deeply even when you've promised yourself not to. And as she lay there in the dark, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel lit up the screen. "I'll see you before I go. Just once more." She stared at it, her heart caught between fear and desire. She didn't know what she would say when that moment came, but she knew she would go because some goodbyes are too heavy to say over text. And some stories, no matter how forbidden, need their ending to be spoken face to face. The day Daniel was supposed to leave, Portland felt colder than usual. Clouds hung low, the city wrapped in gray light. Emma hadn't replied to his last message for 2 days. She didn't know what to say. Every time she picked up her phone, words failed her. What could she tell him? That she didn't want him to go. That she was afraid of what she'd feel if she saw him again. That she had already broken every rule she ever made for herself. By noon, she had convinced herself to stay home. She told herself that not saying goodbye was easier, cleaner. But when evening came, the silence in her apartment grew unbearable. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, felt too loud, too empty. Finally, she grabbed her coat and keys. Her heart was pounding as if it already knew she was about to lose something she didn't even have. She found him at the riverfront, the same place they had walked so many times before. He was sitting on a bench, camera resting beside him, watching the water move slowly under the bridge lights. When he saw her, his face softened, relief washing over his features. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," she replied. "I figured." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with everything they hadn't said. Finally, Emma asked, "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow morning." Words hit harder than she expected. "And then what?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm supposed to go back to Seattle, maybe fix things. Or maybe not. I haven't decided." She nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. The honesty in his voice made it harder, not easier. Daniel turned to her, his eyes steady. "I don't want to hurt anyone, Emma. Not you, not her. But these last few months, they've meant something to me." She looked down at her hands. "You made me break my own peace," she said softly. "I spent years building walls, convincing myself I was fine alone. Then you showed up and everything changed." He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her hand. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." His touch wasn't bold. It was uncertain, like he was afraid she'd pull away. She didn't. They sat there in silence, hand in hand, both knowing it couldn't last. The city lights shimmered on the water, the air smelled of rain. And time seemed to slow down just long enough for her to feel the ache of wanting something she couldn't keep. After a while, he said if this were a different time, maybe. She cut him off gently. "But it's not. And that's what makes it real." We met when we weren't supposed to, but it still mattered." He looked at her then, really looked. And in his eyes, she saw everything. The affection, the regret. It's a quiet acceptance that some stories are beautiful precisely because they end too soon. When he finally stood up, she followed. They walked side by side down the empty street, their hands brushing but never fully holding. The silence was heavy but not painful, more like an understanding at her car. They stopped. "Will you write to me?" she asked, even though she knew the answer. "I don't think I should," he said softly. "If I do, we'll never let go." She nodded, tears burning at the back of her eyes. "Then don't." He smiled sadly. "You're stronger than you think, Emma. I don't feel like it." "Ha," he said again. For a second, the world went still. Then, before she could think, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't a desperate hug. It was slow, quiet, full of all the things they never said out loud. He held her back, his chin resting gently on her head. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. When they finally pulled away, she whispered, "Goodbye, Daniel." He looked at her one last time. "Goodbye, Emma." Ah. And then he was gone. She stood there long after his car disappeared from sight, the cold air pressing against her skin. It felt like standing at the edge of something she couldn't see. Loss and relief tangled together. She got into her car, drove home, and cried for the first time in years. Not because she'd been betrayed, but because she had felt something real and had to let it go. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Emma sat by her window with a cup of coffee, watching the light spill across the buildings. Everything looked the same, yet different. Her life, once quiet and carefully controlled, now felt too large, too full of emotions she didn't know how to name. Over the next few weeks, she tried to return to her routines, work, errands. Quiet evenings, but Daniel's presence lingered in small ways. She'd see someone taking photos downtown and feel her chest tighten. She'd dip past the cafe they used to visit and have to look away. She even tried deleting his messages once, but couldn't bring herself to do it. Then, one afternoon, she received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just her name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a small photograph. It was of her standing by the window of that cafe, sunlight falling across her face. At the bottom he had written, "To the woman who reminded me what honesty feels like." She didn't cry this time. She smiled instead, a soft, sad smile that came from understanding. He hadn't written to reopen anything. It was a thank you, a goodbye that didn't need words. That night, Emma placed the photo next to the one he had given her before. She realized she wasn't angry or broken. She was grateful. Love hadn't returned the way she expected. It hadn't come with promises or forever. It had come like rain, brief, cleansing, and gone before she could hold on to it. But it had washed away the dust from her heart. The fear that had kept her from living fully in the months that followed, Emma found herself changing. She began saying yes to more things, joining a local photography class, going out with friends more often, even traveling on her own. She no longer lived in fear of feeling too much. She had learned that pain wasn't something to hide from. It was proof that she was still capable of love. Sometimes she'd walk by the river where they last met, and memories would come back. His laughter, his calm voice, that last embrace. But it no longer hurt the same way. It was a memory she carried gently. Like a favorite song she no longer played often, but still remembered every word of. One evening, while walking home, she saw a young couple standing by the bridge, laughing under the rain. They reminded her of how it had all started. A simple meeting, a shared smile, and everything that followed. She smiled to herself, realizing that every person who walks into your life leaves something behind. Some teach you to love. Others teach you to let go. Daniel had done both later that night. She sat by her window, her favorite spot, watching the city lights shimmer. The air was cool and the sound of rain filled the room. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, "I was curious. And he made me forget every rule I ever set for myself." But she didn't regret it. Not one moment. Because sometimes life's most beautiful lessons come disguised as mistakes. And sometimes Love, even when it's not meant to last, is still worth every heartbeat it costs. Months later, Emma received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "I saw rain in your city again." There was no name, no message, just a photograph attached. It showed Portland's skyline at dusk, the same river glistening under the bridge lights. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She smiled, saved the photo, and whispered softly, "Good luck, Daniel." Then she closed her laptop, made a cup of tea, and let the rain fall outside, calm, steady, endless. For the first time in years, Emma Parker wasn't haunted by what could have been. She was at peace with what had been and ready for whatever might come next.